Hey guys, so what we're going to do today is we are going to look at how to find the domain and range of a function. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take out packet one that we worked in yesterday, and we're going to skip over to page six, and we're going to fill in the notes as we go along. We're going to skip a couple of things. Now that we're on remote teaching, some of these things are not necessary to really go over because you're going to review them next year and algebra 2. So just to kind of get the whole idea across, we're going to just look at certain pieces of information. So first of all, we're going to look at the top of the page on page 6. It says, how do we determine the domain and range of a function? Well, first, let's just talk about that the domain, so fill this in, of a relation is the first element of ordered pairs, or the x value. And in the table, it's the one on this side, or if it's a lateral table, it would be the one on the top. Those are your domains. Just a fancy way of saying x. Now, for the range, your range are your y values. It's just another fancy way of saying y values. So in a table, it would be that column. And if it were this way, it would be down here. And it's the y value in an ordered pair, which is your second value. Okay? So the way we like to remember it is that D comes before R in the alphabet, just like X comes before Y. So your D goes with the range. Your D goes with the X values, your domain goes with X, and your range goes with Y. So I want you to pause the video and make sure you have all this information. Now, the next slide we're going to go to is we're going to go down to the review section. Now, some of you may remember it. It's not clicking. Here it goes. We did talk about certain things here, which we're going to skip around. We're really going to mostly focus on roster form. But interval notation is something we talked about when we were dealing with inequalities. This we're going to get to later on when we deal with graphing. But really right now, when we're looking at domain and range, I just want you to know how to list your numbers. So let's look at the bottom of the page. We're going to look at number 1. Now it says state the domain and range of the following functions. So technically, when you're looking for the domain, all you're going to do is you're going to just look for the x values. So we're just going to underline our x values, and we're just going to list them. Now, if there's repeating numbers, we're going to just write it once. I'm going to use D for domain. I use my squiggly wigglies, and I'm going to start with the lowest number, which would be -9. And then I'm going to go to -4, and then I'm going to write 4 and then 8. So I'm writing my numbers from least to greatest. Then the next thing they're going to ask us is find the range. The range are our y values, which is this number, this number, this number, and this number. So we write them from least to greatest. I'm going to use an R to represent range. Put my brackets. Smallest number is 6. And then we have 0, and then 3, and then 5. So that's really all they're asking for when they're asking for your domain and range. You're just listing the numbers that are present in that function. Now the next one, we're going to look at example 2. Find the domain and range. Well, this side is your domain, and this side is your range. So my domain, the numbers that are touching are, or actually letters here, A, B, and C. So my domain is made up of the letters A, B, and C. And my range is made up of E and F. So that's what you're going to list out. Anything that's being mapped to in this problem, if you notice, A is being mapped to D, B is being mapped to D, and C is being mapped to E. Each one of those elements is being mapped to one of the other, so they're part of our domain. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to flip it over to the next page, and we're just going to look at a couple of examples on 3, 4, 5, and 6. Some of these, they're really kind of going above and beyond, so we don't really need to go too much into them. But I do want you to know you will be revisiting these type of questions in Algebra 2 and geometry, so it's nothing to be too concerned about. But let's just look at first, if we look at number 3, We're going to look at the domain. So the domain, again, are your x values. So all you have to do is just list 3, 5, and 7. And then they want us to find the range. The range are just our y values. Even though it says f of x is just a fancy way of saying y. Our range is going to be 4, 6, and 8. Now, we will get to this later on, so I'm just going to skip it for right now just to kind of get the concept over. We'll move into it a little bit further later down the road, but where we can plug into the calculator. So I would just want you to go over to number 5 here. Okay, we're going to skip 6 because that's more of an Algebra 2 question. The one thing I want you to do, though, for this question, for number 5, when we're looking at the domain, I do want you to notice I colored in that dot. It was an open dot before, but right now I just want you guys to really have it colored in to make it a little easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the domain, which is the number that the x goes to and from. So the best way to do this is we're going to take our pen. I'm using 2 different colors, and I'm going to make a rectangle. So a rectangle has equal sides. And then I'm going to make another color up here so I can see what my domain and range are. So my domain is the blue. It's what does this number go to this number? Well, it starts at -3 and ends at 4. So how we write that is -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 4. So that just means it's all numbers going from -3 to 4. Now we're going to go look at our range. Our range starts down here. It's our y values and goes all the way up to that number. So our range starts at -5, and it's our y values, don't forget, and it goes all the way up to 3. So that would be how we would represent our domain and range given a graph. Now, like I said, in the future, you guys are going to get into more complicated questions, but this is pretty much it for today. Just understanding that the domain is just a fancy way of saying x and the range is a fancy way of saying y. So what you're going to do now is you're going to make sure that you have everything copied down in the packet. So pause the video and rewind it if you need to. And when you're done, you're going to go back to the Google Classroom and you're going to complete the Google form on domain and range. Okay? They are similar to the ones in the packet. I did skip around, but just really understanding what the domain and range go with. It's part of your turn, and I did skip some questions, so don't worry. And we'll reinforce some of it tomorrow in another classwork problem. Okay? Have a good day, guys, and good luck.